My name is Daniel Leal, and I'm a dual BA student between Columbia University and Sciences Po Paris. So, before we begin, some logistics. After the break, the next two panels will be in Portuguese. Right after, we'll come back to English. And if you would like to send any questions throughout the panels, please do so via our app. Now, as we delve into Brazil's journey towards achieving sustainable growth through substantial investments in infrastructure, it is imperative that we remain aware of the profound social implications entailed by this green transformation. While recent regulations have made significant strides in promoting various social objectives, notably through sanitation bills and green national plans, it is essential to contemplate what measures are necessary to further this cause. Equally vital is the assessment of the infrastructure required to fortify Brazil in adapting against climate effects. Along with these policy changes, Brazil faces a window with numerous risks and challenges, as well as great opportunities. How can Brazil grow, invest, and benefit from this window while generating social impact? What measures should be taken to use water and other natural resources responsibly? To answer these questions, we invite 4 experts on the subject to discuss this increasingly complex issue. We call to the stage Daniel Abdo, Chief Communications Officer at Sigma Lithium and partner at A10 Investimentos, Mônica Altamirano, Climate Impact Director at WaterEquity, Malu Paiva, Executive Vice President of Sustainability at Vale, and Flávia Teixeira, Environmental, Corporate Social Responsibility, and Energy Transition Manager at Engie. And to moderate the panel, we call Tarcila Ursini, Chief Purpose Advisor at EB Capital and independent board member to multiple different corporations and NGOs. Please join me in a round of applause to welcome our panelists.
Hello. Thank you, Daniel, very much. And first of all, I would like to congratulate Luciana, Jorge, Marina, all Colombian students who made this possible. It's amazing what you're doing here. And also, it's very inspiring to be here in this panel with the vast majority of women. We said, Mônica said that is Barbie's panel with just Ken here.
Very intimidating.
Daniel, you're really welcome here also with the discussion. But we really need more female voices for the challenges we are facing right now and the opportunities also. But as Daniel says, this panel invites us to reflect on systemic and cross-cutting view of all dimensions: economic, social, cultural, and environmental. We all know, and we discussed it here before, that we have great and historical opportunities, economic opportunities in the green economy for Brazil. But how to grow and invest in a green future that truly benefits Brazilians, that truly create balance and environmental protection and reduce the enormous gap of social inequalities and poverty that still plague our country. It's not a simple equation, and it's not time for us to shed our certainties and engage with the urgency and necessary restlessness, transparency, openness of learning, innovation, competitive with collaboration, right, Luciana, and understanding of life. So for this discussion, I'm here with 4 pioneers executives, leaders in company, fundamental to these discussions in the mining and steel sector, strategic minerals, water and sanitation, and energy. So in the first round, we will give each of you 3 to 4 minutes, and then we will discuss the topic you raise, okay? And if you don't like the questions, Joe, please complain to ChatGPT, who also helped me to make these notes. So I will start.
Can they help also to answer?
So I will start with Malu. Malu, you are really well-known, renowned, and pioneer sustainability executive in the country. So over 20 years ago when we've met, you lead the creation and implementation of sustainability strategy at Altamirano Real in Brazil, which became a national, international reference. Later on, you led also your legacy in other sectors like pulp and paper. 2.5 years ago, you took a role of Executive VP of Sustainability at Vale, which has faced immense challenges in recent years, right? Especially with the 2 historical dam accidents in Brazil, in Minas Gerais. So, were they a truly turning point for the company? And what are the main structural actions the company has taken to genuinely reconnect with nature and the communities directly impacted by your business model? And the question, in Brazil we say, a questão que não quer calar, the question, what personally motivates you to take this position?
I don't know if ChatGPT will help. Okay, well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to be here. To accept this job was for sure the most difficult decision in my whole career. The headhunter called me many times, and then one day he told me, look, I will tell you the name of the company, and then I'm sure that you are going to sit down and have an interview with them, because I was avoiding to talk to him. I was doing quite well in my previous job. And then he said, that's Vale. And then I told him, wow, take my name off this list. I will never work at Vale. Forget it. And wow, Malu, forget, take my name out of the list. And 2-3 weeks after this, I was having dinner with my husband. And then I told him, wow, this guy, he does not stop calling me. And said, what's it about? I said, it's about Vale. And you're not talking to Vale? He said, no. It's such a messy company. There is no one tragedy. There are 2 tragedies on their journey. You know, I have been working so hard on the sustainability arena. I mean, I don't want now, at almost 60 years old, you know, to work in such type of company. And then my husband told me, don't you think that maybe you have been working on sustainability for so many years to be prepared to be part of such a complex moment of a company? You know, well, I said, maybe you have a point. Then I start to talk to Vale. I talked first to the CEO, Eduardo Bartolomeu. And why I'm here today on behalf of Vale, 2 words. First word is about transformation. I talked to a CEO that he told me about all the changes that were undergoing at Vale, and that when we are outside Vale, I think it's impossible to recognize that they are happening. And they have to do with 2 things mainly. One is obviously about technical issues, mainly regarding all the geotechnical approach that we used to have. A lot of governance were put in place, risk committee looking at geotechnical issues, sustainability committee only for sustainability risks being put in place. Today, in our ESG portal, you can see all the structures, all the dams structures of Vale, and with their current level of emergency, you know, so more transparency. Also, the creation of monitoring centers 24/7, André and Clarissa know them well today. I mean, really looking at the situation of those dams very, very carefully. Talking about variable compensation of the top 200 in the company, having safety, having diversity, having climate change as part of it, something around 40% of the variable compensation. So a lot of measurements were taken on the governance side, on the technical side. But he also realizes that the culture needs to change. That if he would be focusing only on the technical side, we would be doing much better, but it's fundamental, but maybe not enough to prevent another tragedy. So he took the responsibility to work towards those two directions, okay? A culture, a more inclusive culture, a culture with a lower power distance, with a more open dialogue, more open to outside Vale. Vale was being called as a very arrogant type of company, who always has the meanings, the money, the tools to create new things or to operate by itself, right? And it has to change. So when he told me those two things, I said, well, that's a process that I want to be part of, you know? Because it's about transformation, and if Vale does well, the impact that this company has is amazing. We are, in the case of Brazil, we are presenting very remote areas, right? We can really make a difference, you know, in the life of many, many people, and in nature as well. So finally, I ended up joining Vale. After 2.5 years, I still think that we are working on both dimensions. I think we have the right drivers in place. I think maybe the speed is not the ideal one sometimes, you know. We could be maybe faster in one thing or another, but I think we are in the right direction. And when Brumadinho happened, I always say that it's a point of inflection at Vale's life. And in that moment, it triggered everything that I told you, but also a more mature sustainability agenda, okay? Starting from the environmental issues. And then I want to make a remark here. It's my second year here. And I'm very glad to have the social being part of one panel. Maybe next year, we would need to have all the panels with the social engaging with the environmental issues. We don't have time. We don't have time to solve one thing and then to solve the other one. And if we try to solve both together, that's what we are trying to do today, trying to solve both together. I'm sure that we are going to use much more intelligently the resources that we have in our hands. And it's happening with us as well. For instance, we have our climate change goals regarding how to reduce our emissions, scope 1, 2, and 3. And we didn't have a very robust social agenda, okay? In our days, we have also long-term goals regarding the social agenda. And one of them is something that we have been criticizing in the beginning, that we want to be we want to help the lifting up of 500,000 people out of extreme poverty, okay? And we were criticized because I heard from some people something like, you are paying another 500,000 people in Vale's payroll. I said, sorry, they are already in our payroll. Okay? They are the ones that are not skilled enough to work in our operations in the north of Brazil, so we have to import people from southeast of Brazil. It's much more expensive. The companies, suppliers that are not present in the north of Brazil, we have to import them from the south of Brazil. And many other examples, right? Because we are in the north of Brazil for 40 years, and we have never invested, we have invested a lot, but we have never invested on structuring things that would make those places a place that's better for everybody to live there and to work there, right? So we hope, and I'm very optimistic that we will be able to come to achieve this goal. So, talking about the social and the environmental agenda, I think that the climate change created something that's very crucial. That's a very clear KPI, tons of CO2 reduction. When you say something like that nowadays, everybody understands what you are talking about. I think we have to have the same thing regarding the social and do it at the same time. Nowadays, we have a forest goal, okay? We are restoring forest, and we are now combining it with taking people out of extreme poverty. We have programs, starting to have programs in place so that we can help people to collect the seeds to plant. They don't need, to have any high skill. They can learn it very fast, and they are getting out of extreme poverty at the same time that we are restoring the forest. Okay, it's just a small example, but I think that's a very important that we, in places like this, we are able to think about those two subjects together. Everything that was said here before is important. It's about competitiveness. And look, I like to work on company, okay? I like to work on a very profitable companies, not at any price, right? That's my role, to assure that we have a very responsible action towards environmental and social issues. No, so, well, I think I took the time. Okay, that's it. More.
Thank you, Malu, very much, and for your transparency and the challenge you are facing, and always about people, right? And I love that you talk about culture and also not only about climate change, but systemic change, right? So I will pass through Daniel, also in the mining sector, but in the strategic minerals. So Daniel, we are facing a global boom in strategic minerals, and would represent also a significant opportunity for Brazil. And you are in Sigma Lithium, a company whose market value exceeds $4 billion, and was a pioneer also in the region in Minas Gerais, in Vale do Jequitinhonha. It's also impressed the green supply value proposition that you have at Sigma. But we all know that the mining sector in general has a high degree of social and environmental impact, from global carbon emissions to biodiversity loss, and also affecting lives of people in local communities, and often exacerbating violence, poverty, inactivity that is temporary, that you're not going to be there anymore, right? So what strategies and initiatives have you undertaken to really leave a positive legacy in the long-term prosperity, especially also being placed in Vale do Jequitinhonha, one of the poorest regions in the country, in Minas Gerais, the state that I was born. So, tell us what the legacy you really are going to leave there in the region.
Sure. So for those of you who don't know Sigma, we are a lithium producer. Our operations are comprised of mineral extraction of the lithium ore and the processing of it through our green tech plant. So before we started operations and addressing the environmental issues first, we commissioned a life cycle analysis assessment of our operations so we could understand what the impact of our operations would be on land, water, and consequently air. So starting with land, right, any mining operations, most mining operations end up having waste piles and tailing dams. And by adapting existing technology, I'm very proud to say that Sigma became the first lithium operations globally without tailing dams. We are able to dry stack our tailings, and not only that, because we don't use hazardous chemicals, we are now selling the tailings as well. And the rejects from the separation and purification processes that we are using to pave the rural roads around our operations. So that addresses the land section. The water, 5 kilometers away from our plant, we have the Jequitinhonha River, which, due to lack of sanitation infrastructure, it's extremely polluted. It's not even proper for industrial use. So we managed to get a license to pump this water all the way to our plant, where we built a water treatment facility, and this water is recirculated within the plant circuit. And then in terms of air, that's where our operations, the hard-to-abate part of our operations. So our trucks in the mining operations run diesel. Today we're using 15% biodiesel. And the explosives, they have AMFO. We are using controlled simulations in order to minimize the effects of these explosions. But all in all, the study concluded that the effect from these, from the explosives and the biodiesel, would be about 0.26 tons of CO2 for every ton of lithium concentrate produced. And by that, we were able to buy 59,000 carbon credits to net that. And so that's how we managed to get what we call 000, zero tailings, zero hazardous chemicals, zero carbon, green lithium. Then addressing the social issue. we made a very difficult decision back in when we started, and this is talking about the A10 fund. We wanted to show the world that it was possible to make a sustainable mining operation. And the first difficult decision that we had, we received every incentive you can possibly imagine to build this plant in Canada. But then we thought, I mean, our deposits are in one of the regions of the world with the lowest human development index of human development in the world. What impact, what transformational impact would we have by taking this plant to Canada versus building it here? And that's how we decided to build it in the Vale de Jequitinhonha, where families lived with 90 reais a month. And we thought the impact would be very transformational. And we're seeing that now. And most of our social initiatives in the region are to help their community, the people in the communities, lift themselves in order to reinsert themselves into society with dignity, with jobs. So the first thing we did, given the lack of opportunities in the region, we started what we called the homecoming program, where what used to happen a lot, the man and the family would leave the Jequitinhonha Valley to other regions in search of jobs, and many times abandon their families. So we were able to reach out to a lot of these people that had left and repatriate them to the Vale de Jequitinhonha. And some of them have jobs at Sigma, some of them have jobs, the indirect jobs that were created with Sigma being there. And then for the women, we created a microcredit program for female entrepreneurs. It's 2,000. It's a 2,000 reais credit for women that make baskets, that make baked goods. But this program started with about 500 women. Today we have over 1,000 women in the program, and we've extended the credit in the program now for potential to 10,000 women. We also have another program to help the farmers in the region. The region is very dry. We have rain only from November to February, more or less. So we're building rainwater capture systems so that these farmers have water supply all year round. And lastly, we're also, since as a company, our goal is to create opportunities for the communities. So we also created a foundation called the Green Lithium Foundation in the region, where a founder's royalty is being donated to this foundation so that we can leave a longer legacy in the region, and this foundation can invest alongside the government, the local governments, in health, education, and sanitation.
Thank you, Daniel, very much. And as you said about sanitation and the importance about also creating the infrastructure there to Sigma Lithium, I will pass to Monica. So Monica, you were the Climate Impact Director of WaterEquity, which is an asset manager with an exclusive focus on ending of the most urgent issues of our time, the global water and sanitation crisis in low-income communities, right? We know that Brazil has nearly 35 million lack access to treated water and 100 million sewer systems, lack of sewer systems. This results, of course, in billions in losses for the country, affecting health, economy, education, and our future as well. But on the other hand, it's also a great opportunity. All the lack of infrastructure is a great opportunity. Like Pedro said, Arminio, all of people are saying that as well. So public and private investments are expected to reach 24 billion only in 2023. But we know that in order to achieve universalization, this amount would need to be almost twice of that. So my question is, could you share here with the audience what WaterEquity's perspective on the Brazilian context, highlighting also the main opportunities and challenges we face, also comparing the perspective you find in other countries? Thank you, Monica.
Thank you, Tarcila. It's a real honor to be here with you. Especially also it feels a little bit like going home, although I can, because I'm born in Nicaragua and live in the Netherlands for the last 21 years. And it's Yeah, I will share our perspective as an asset manager that invests in financial institutions, enterprises, and infrastructure for water and sanitation only in emerging economies. And I mean, we are looking especially within our new infrastructure strategy, with great interest to Brazil. And why? On the one hand, because the challenges are very large, like you pointed out. You took all the numbers I was trying to point out, but 35 million lacks access to safe water sources, 100 million to sanitation, and that's costing the country billions, right, in health, education, and in the economy at large, because that comes with a lot of water risk for companies too. But on the other hand, I think you have taken quite a good step with the 2020 sanitation law, and that's creating like really strong incentives and creating an unprecedented window of opportunity, not just within the Latin American region, but globally, to have much more private sector participation in the provision of those services and have more private capital flowing into solving something that is actually, I mean, access to basic services like water and sanitation is just like an essential pillar of a just climate transition anywhere in the world, right? And it's creating those incentives, that law. I mean, maybe you know it even better than me, but first, because it's putting really clear, ambitious goals. By 2033, you should reach 99% access to water and 90% to sanitation, independent of whether it's in rural or urban areas. But it's also not allowing automatic contracts between state companies and municipalities, and requiring that all of them prove that they have the financial capacity to do those investments that will lead to an universalization. So that's already driving a lot of private investments. Like you say, Tarcila, 24.6 billion of reals are expected to be invested only this year. But if we think about impact, that's already there are already concessions and PPP contracts that are impacting the life of 19 million in process, and another pipeline under bidding that could impact the life of other 20 million Brazilians, right? And that's great. And I think the problem is, however hopeful that is, the truth is that we're not there yet, and the devil is always in the details. And as our mandate are those underserved communities, we have been looking carefully at it, and we see that, so there are a number of challenges, right? One is just purely from an investment perspective. Those need to be double, 30 or 40 billion per year until 2033 to achieve those investments. Investments in water infrastructure have very long terms, long investment cycles, are quite perceived as quite risky, and the volumes that are needed are so massive, right? So to have those characteristics make that you need more creditors cooperating, longer terms, and that doesn't make it the most attractive option for private capital markets, right? But if we zoom also into the reality of those historically underserved groups and vulnerable communities, there is hope in the new law, because ANA will be the regulator, right? And the explicit call for universalization means that all those standards should apply everywhere in Brazil. But there are no specific proper regulatory and institutional arrangements that give a clear signal that these regulatory instances will go beyond what has been their traditional, let's say, geographical scope and mandate, and will engage proactively, not only in the regulation, but also in the type of contracts that are catered to those underserved communities, like informal settlements that have, for example, not a clear tenure of where they live, right? Indigenous communities and rural areas. So without this proactive stand of the regulatory instances, there are things that were well thought in the law, like mandatory connection. So a concessionaire that already notified the people that the service is available can send a bill within 30 days to that household, right, for the connection, because you want to drive adoption. But if you don't have that other proactive stand of regulators, then the whole reform it could backfire, and you can put it in risk, right? So to achieve basically universal access and a just transition in Brazil, we need to complement the regulatory changes with a new financing approach that was talked before that blends different risk appetites, uses concessional finance in a catalytic way, but also with a well-designed transition plan and investment strategy, one that considered explicitly those differences you already have pointed out between regions and between income groups. One that anticipates and considers the complex combination of factors that avoid connection, which are not just financial, but they are also behavioral and cultural, and offer those different types of debt and equity and microloans when it's needed, because to reach the last mile connection, that price is still a bottleneck. And in fact, that's how until now most of our work has been in having those microloans to access the last mile. But also making sure each of those investments that will be done is climate and future-proof, right? And is well designed to have those environmental and social impacts, not just like incremental, but transformational. That is enhancing the resilience at the watershed level. I don't know if you're water people, but that's the unit at which the water cycle and most of the climate impacts will be felt. In the urban water systems, but more importantly, in everything you design, how will those vulnerable groups will be affected and how their resilience will be enhanced is what matters. So that's why we're working together in cooperation with our sister organization, water.org, but also other strategic partners in around the world. And we want to work with you, really. I mean, that's why we're very happy to be here with countries like Brazil that are willing to take those courageous steps and to work collectively to solve the water crisis, right? Demystifying, which is very important, private sector participation in the provision of water services, working on the details of the regulation and the contracts to make sure you're creating the right incentives, not just to any capital to flow in, but capital that is willing to enhance impact and equalize, and ultimately exploit the potential of market-based approaches. Because, I mean, our mission is, and we believe that is this possible, is to build a sustainable global capital market for safe water and sanitation that reach directly those that need it the most. So we hope in some time 135 billion people can have their human dignity.
Fantastic, Monica. We should we feel that we wanted to stay here like for days here listening, and it's amazing how you said about institutional arrangements, type of contracts, proactive regulation, new financial approach. Is very creative in how you also collaborate and also work with vulnerability groups that will be affected. So thank you to work in Brazil, invest in Brazil, and help us to do that. So now we pass to Flávia. Flávia, Engie is amongst the world's largest energy companies, and Brazil ranks among the group top 3 most important countries where Engie operates in generation, transmission, commercialization, and not at the end of the distribution, right? But in Brazil, you are 100% renewable. However, Brazil needs to double its transmission capacity by 2050 to reach net zero goal. What has a nearly 200-year-old company learned? What is critical? And what are the challenges to grow while offsetting and minimizing environmental impacts and also promoting social development in the country? So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tarcila. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you, sharing this reflection with these inspiring colleagues. And Malu, thank you for the introduction, because it reminds me a bit of my history. I took a long time to take courage to go to the private sector. So I spent like 30 years in the third sector, 19 years in the public sector, and then I took courage to go to Engie 4 years ago, and I do not regret at all, because I believe we can do so much from the private sector, and so when you say that we must demystify the relationship between public and private sector, I can tell it's possible to do transparent, ethical partnership between public and private. So we really need to break these barriers to move forward. So, and another point is the opportunity to talk about social in this event. This panel is a great opportunity to call attention to the gap between these two global agendas, environment and social. First of all, I think it's important to remark the cultural and the structural distinctions when we talk about environmental, climate, social, or even biodiversity in Brazil or Latin America in comparison to the North American or European approach. The challenges and the threats are so different, and so should define different approaches, tools, and solutions. So it's important that we have more panels talking about social, because it's really the central point of all we are discussing here. There is no forest, there is no climate action, there is no biodiversity, there is no water security if we don't talk about social relationship. And that's the problem, that's the central problem that we need to face. So it's clear now that addressing environmental topics and climate topics is in the center of the agenda, because it's clear that both are related to financial risks and natural resources scarcity. So it's a kind of survivance for the companies and the states and regions to address this problem. But on the other hand, social inequality, which is in general remains a less tangible issue in charge of private sector. And we know it's one of our main challenges to address, but we don't know how to deal with it. What are the indicators, how far is our responsibility to improve development in the regions where we are present? And we all know that social investment tends to be the first budget cut in times of crisis. And this is something that needs to change, even though society seems to pay more attention to environmental impacts than to poverty, as the social relations and inequality weren't the main cause, are the main cause of all challenges related to environmental and climate emergency. Having said that, I would say some words about Engie policies, commitments, and actions. Engie is a global leader in the energy transition. It's present in Brazil for 25 years now, operating electricity generation 100% renewable since last year, 3,000 kilometers of transmission line and 4,500 of natural gas pipeline. We believe in the gas whole for the energy transition of industrial transition and cities transition in Brazil, and far. And then we use this infrastructure to the biomethane, biogas, and who knows, hydrogen soon. So we are present in more than 250 municipalities, 9,000 kilometers of reservoir perimeters, and so we are talking about protected areas, so it's a big responsibility how to take care of all this, because when you talk about forests burning in Brazil, none of them are under our responsibility and care. We can assure that, and it must be highlighted, because it's the price of the developing and activities in Brazil. No other country you start developing a project with the responsibility to protect 20%, 60%, or 80% as in Amazon. Nobody starts with this obligation, and that must be highlighted. When we compare where we are, where we must be at some point, but it's really impressive. No other country has such strict responsibility and obligation as we have in Brazil. So And another point, for instance, we invest in carbon credit for 20 years now. The first carbon credit we emitted was in 2004. So we are a long time waiting for the regulation in Brazil. And we don't talk about additionality of renewable energy carbon credit, but we went all this trajectory to wait for, who knows, this year we have a regulated carbon market in Brazil, who knows? We are playing only in the voluntary market for a long time, and we do not sell because I think Plinio said here before, it was a great speech, how companies that are using carbon offset are much more aware of the carbon pricing and much more aware of this, their role on reducing emission mitigation than in comparison to other that doesn't use yet, are not used to price carbon yet. So it's not how people say yet. People still believe that having the possibility of carbon offset will make business go business as usual forever. No, it's not like that. The studies are showing the opposite. So taking responsibility is the first step. We hear a lot from corporations. Recently, I watched the panel with many oil and gas companies, and I think it was the CEO of Petrogal that said something quite different from many corporations, that we used to say that we will bring development and life quality for the communities, and I think that's not the best approach. If we can come to a community and avoid and address and not leaving anyone behind and avoid that all the families and communities impacted has commitment or decreasing of their quality of life, I think it's the best start for a prosperous relationship with the community, where I think we shouldn't bring the idea that we will be responsible for development or growth of the community, but first of all, we need to avoid that any family suffer any kind of loss because of the company starting that project. So I think it's a good way to start a relationship with the community. So, of course, we must assume that all infrastructure project causes impact, and each one of them must be prevented, mitigation, and properly compensated in order to avoid any loss or prejudice to the impacted family. Well, the transition to the carbon neutrality economy will lead several transformations. We all know about that. And it's already forcing divestment and unemployment in many sectors and regions. That's something that's not much talked. We really force for changing, transformation, but we are not aware of all this workforce mobility, all this divestment, that vision, and many sectors will suffer with this transformation that we need to improve. So to address that, Engie has recently approved a just transition policy, guiding the actions that encompass observing tax justice principles, enhancing employability and skills, providing affordable energy, and also building territorial projects. Building territorial projects, contributing to territorial resilience by preserving natural resources, neighboring communities, and reducing vulnerability. So I believe that active listening is crucial for understanding what exactly our communities impacted need, not what we think they need. So it's a good beginning. So we also focus our social investment in education, gender equality, and income generation. So I would like to bring some example of projects that we are carrying out now. One of them is the third year of the project Meninas de 10 Anos. We call 10 years old girls climate emergence in partnership with Museum of Tomorrow. For the first year, we provide capacitation on STEM careers and climate action from girls between 10 and 16 years. So this project counts on volunteer mentoring of women scientists like Mercedes Bustamante, that we all know that's part of IPCC, so it's volunteer action. There is also a hub that we understand that we need to provide qualified information about energy transition. So we now have a hub called www.alendaenergia.com.br, now with 3.5 million readers, where we talk about energy transition, opportunities and risk in an accessible language for anyone who would like to understand about that. And we launched this 1 week ago. The other project, from waste to energy, we are installing several biodigesters in many public schools in our regions in Brazil. So we provide them 7-8 hours of biogas for cooking at the schools, and biofertilizers, so they use it in nurseries and agroforest systems. So this, we believe that we are improving knowledge about energy transition, how we can take advantage of the resources that we have around us, and maybe prepare our culture to better use of residues, and that's all about energy. So these are some examples that I would like to share with you.
Thank you, Flávia, very much for your talk. And it's a lot of things to do with especially the collective of indigenous women, quilombolas, Afro-descendants, so many minorities calling for voices that we need to include in our business models right now, which is not easy to do, right? So I will invite each of you, time flies, to quickly, just very quickly, point it out, something that you like to comment, something that you think is highlight to speech that is essential for us to act or reflect upon. So Malu, Monica, Daniel, and Flávia, very quickly, if you can make any questions and wanted to point it out. 1 minute, please, each.
So very quickly, just point out that I think Brazil is very uniquely positioned to assume a protagonist role in this green energy transition that we're experiencing right now. We have an abundance of natural resources. As Artur pointed out, we have one of the cleanest energy grids in the world. From a geopolitical standpoint, we are friendly to the global north and to the global south. The one thing we're lacking is speed with our regulatory bodies. I think ideas, technology, and initiatives are advancing a lot quicker than the regulatory bodies can react. So with that, I think there's a very unique opportunity of the decade for Brazil here.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Flávia.
Well, first of all, I think we need to address forest deforestation. I think it's the main message. There is no innovation, technological innovation that can put in Brazil in the neutrality trajectory without addressing the forest deforestation. Illegal and maybe legal. We need to talk about alternatives for business that have alternatives. Not most of them doesn't. But I think it's very important also to engage the leaderships to improve the connection between public and private sector and all the impacts on regulatory framework. And also, I think we must connect better with nature, enjoy it more, because if you don't understand the value of it, how can we preserve it? And it seems that our youth and children are every day more distant to this use of nature resources. So I think it would be a great path for this transformation.
Monica. Thank you, Flávia.
Yeah, I would say that there is a lot that Brazil can embrace, for example, from the idea of a regenerative economy, and just refer 3 principles. So now is empower participation. I mean, you don't just consult people, but you create the spaces so that they can be part of the solution and shaping the solution. If we look at water problems, it's essential to have that local understanding, because you have nothing and an adaptation strategy that doesn't know the field, for example, right? So so embracing maybe all those many voices will just make you stronger. And maybe you can find strategies that will work better, because these people have a perspective that if you always have access to water and sanitation, for example, you won't have. So that's one, empower participation. The other part is also about balancing and holding true apparently contradictory truth, like cooperation and competition, right? Like, is it public or private? Is it nature or gray infrastructure? So if we're just willing to look a little deeper, we can find things that balance both of those contradictions. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica.
Well, I agree with everything that was said by the 3 colleagues here. I just want to add maybe 1 or 2 points. One point is scale. I think we, companies, associations, we have the Fundo Vale, I mean, a lot of experience. We have ITV, Instituto Tecnológico Vale, a lot of experience on sciencing, on restoring, on the Amazon. We have already found good models, for instance, in bioeconomy, how to work, how to reinforce, making partnership with local governments, with communities. So we found solutions, we found models, but how to scale them up, you know, on the speed that's necessary. I think that's a huge question that we have. I think that's not about the money. The issue is really about how we can get together, how we can work more systemically, or how we think different about what is to scale a solution for the social and for the environmental issues. That would be my point.
Fantastic, Malu. Well, unfortunately, time has flown by, but to end our panel, inspired by Marília Gabriela, a beloved Brazilian presenter, I will propose a very quick fire round with questions for you to answer in 1 or 2 words, or a very short sentence. The sequence will be this one here, okay? So let's go. Are you ready? What is essential for human development?
Health, knowledge, and grit.
Liberty and emancipation.
Ensure human dignity.
To be listened, to be respected, and have the freedom to act.
What is essential for environmental balance?
Preservation of land, water, and air.
Interconnection and cooperation.
Valuing and managing more holistically our global common goods, water, soil, and air.
Awareness, and then to become responsible for.
Is systemic thinking present or future?
Present.
Immediately.
It's how the whole world works, but not how we're thinking yet.
Not enough. We need systemic acting, not only thinking.
Fantastic. What is true leadership?
One that is inspirational.
Humility. I think the true leadership is humble and aware of the crucial role, responsibility.
Monica.
Courageous and regenerative in environmental and social terms.
Courageous, vision, and empathy.
So thank you very much. Please join me to thank you this fantastic panel. Thank you, all of you. And let's